This is the New York Police Department's Bomb Squad. Part human, part dog, part robot, all one team.
Lethal and indiscriminate. To disarm one is to save countless lives.
NYPD Bomb Squad has given the all clear.
One reason the members of the oldest and biggest bomb squad in the United States are unique.
Bomb squad was able to safely remove a device.
When you don't see them, the NYPD Bomb Squad is always watching for that unsuspecting threat.
NYPD Bomb Squad racing in, then hauling away another suspicious package.
Package has been properly identified.
You're listening to Tales from the Boom Room, profiles of the NYPD's arson, explosion, and bomb squad. And we're certainly representing the Boom Room tonight. Before we begin, of course, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 232 of the Mike the New Haven podcast. You're getting 2 volumes of Tales from the Boom Room in 1 week. If you haven't checked out the previous episode, that was volume 32 of Tales from the Boom Room, covering the 1994 Edward Leary subway bombing. It was a firebombing on the 4 train in Lower Manhattan. And joining me to dissect that is a man, or a couple guys, I should say, that my next guest, who I'll introduce in a moment, knows quite well. The first guy, of course, Billy Ryan, retired detective out of the Arson Explosion Squad and the co-creator and co-executive producer of this miniseries. And the other guy, Dan McNally. Hadn't had those guys on the show in a while, but it was good to have them rejoin me for that episode. And before we begin, I'm rocking my Bomb Squad shirt tonight, if you could see it. Special thanks to my man, Kevin Barry, for getting me this shirt. I very much appreciate him sending it my way. Much obliged, Kevin. I appreciate it. So, like I said, volume 33, second edition of Tales from the Boom Room this week with my next guest, who for 22 years, had a career in the NYPD that revolved around chasing madmen of different kinds. First, robbers and drug dealers as a street cop, both on patrol, and later on the anti-crime unit, and later mad bombers and stone-cold terrorists as a member of the NYPD Bomb Squad, of which he arrived to in the spring of 2000, as we'll discuss tonight. And after retiring in 2005, he would not stay quiet. He stayed as an instructor. After all, with all that knowledge kicking around in your head in the Bomb Squad, you got to share it with other people. And he did that as an instructor with both FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security before retiring a couple of years ago in 2020. And that for this volume 33 of Tales from the Boom Room, a man I've been trying to get for a while. And finally, he's here tonight. Retired NYPD Bomb Squad Sergeant Tony Biondolilo. Tony, welcome. How are you?
How are you?
I'm doing well. It's good to have you. It's been a long time coming, like I said. So finally tonight you're here. And the question that I always begin with before I get to anything involving your career, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in Coney Island, the Coney Island area, Gravesend area of Brooklyn.
And did you have any family on the job? Was your dad on the job?
No one. I was the first one, and then I was followed by one of my cousins, and then my son.
What made you want to come on the job?
I was in the military, and I was either go to jail or go to the service. So I went to the service, and they said, "Listen, you're qualified to be a military policeman." So I did it, and I enjoyed it. And I actually ended up a military police investigator for about 3 years. And then when my time was done, I got out and waited for the PD to call. And in between that, I ended up working with the United Nations Security Service for about 3 years until I went to the police department.
And that would certainly play well later on, of course, with your arrival to the Bomb Squad, and given how much the UN and the Bomb Squad coordinate on security
Absolutely.
matters. It was a plus. Real quick, because he was, I don't know if he was there at the same time. PD called him in 1980, and he went to the PD. But Don Sadawi was working UN security, too, at one point. You crossed paths with him there?
Yes, me and Don Sadawi. I remember the day Don Sadawi actually left the UN. I was working a Sunday 4 to 12. They had just bombed the Turkish mission. And who showed up? Don Sadawi was. Don was one of the. He was on the other side of the fence now, but yeah, we worked together at the United Nations. And then he actually called me in 1986 to come down to Manhattan. I went down to Manhattan. He wanted me to interview for the Bomb Squad back then. And obviously, my career was going in a different direction at the time. And, I was going into the Organized Crime Control Bureau. And I passed on it.
You were happy where you were, as we'll discuss tonight. This is Tales from the Boom Room, Volume 33, which retired NYPD Bomb Squad Sergeant Tony Biondolilo. Shout out to our friends tuning in tonight on the live chat. Jay Driscoll, he's always here, of course, and I appreciate that. Steven Zaslavsky, an assistant commissioner with the New Haven Fire Department here in my neck of the woods. Joe Maliga, tuning in from Rochester, New York. Alicia B., another person who's always here. And retired NYPD street crime Lieutenant Pete Pranzo, as well as an author. And look who's here. Paulie Pericone's tuning in via LinkedIn as well.
He's the best. Paulie was the best.
Good man, Paul, of course, and he was here for the last
Absolutely.
edition of Tales from the Boom Room, and he was featured
Best work
recently.
ethic in the police department.
Oh yeah, and a great career, of course, emergency service, and then he went over to
Absolutely.
Truck 11 in 2002. People are saying, and I'm hearing this a little, and it doesn't bother me as much. Your sound's a little staticky. You're coming in clear, but it's like a little static.
Could be me.
Yeah, I don't know.
It could be my voice. I'm a little hoarse. I actually am recovering from surgery, so I'm still a little hoarse from the anesthesia and stuff. So I don't know if that's it.
Yeah, don't worry about it. We'll work around it. It's fine. So, before I get to the patrol years, as Don covered in his book, Rendered Safe, it's interesting because I've never been inside the building, at least to my recollection. I don't know if I've been inside the building. No, I don't think I have. But it's a city within a city. There's a lot besides that building that everybody sees when they're walking around in Midtown Manhattan, and trying to police that, for lack of a better word, is daunting to say the least. But I imagine, given once you learned that and felt comfortable in that assignment, the NYPD had to be a breeze by comparison.
Yeah, without a doubt. Listen, in my time and Paulie's time, cops, we could be cops. And if you work in Manhattan, you can work anywhere. I mean, I worked all over the city, but when I got to Manhattan, it was a whole different adventure.
No, for sure. Last note on your UN years, the problem is, and you saw this come to roost with the 1997 UN letter bombs incident, the problems of other parts of the world are brought there because there's so many nations involved in the UN. And you have to be on high alert, screening the mail, for example, being alert of any kind of threats against certain heads of state that might be coming in to visit. Al-Hayat, who was a target of that letter bomb campaign in 1997, has their offices there. You never know what might be, or who might be targeting them. So just tell me, without giving anything that's classified away, about the intelligence briefings, if there were any that would go on during that time, and the rapports that you guys would build with these visitors who were people who frequented the UN every day.
Well, when I was at the UN, they received a few letter bombs. Are you talking about as far as me being with the NYPD or as UN security?
UN in this case.
Say again?
UN in this case.
Well, in the UN, obviously, we were briefed. The UN security forces were made up of officers from all over the world, different levels of experience, mostly police officers and military personnel. We were briefed quite well by the NYPD. We had a great relationship with them. Even though it's sovereign ground, it's international territory, they would never stop, or we would never stop the NYPD, from responding. We always had a great working relationship with them, especially when it came to intelligence. They had more intelligence than we would get.
Of course. So I guess going to the other side of the fence now, you're coming into the NYPD during a time in which, as I covered before, anybody that's coming on during the 70s and during the 80s, really into the early 90s, is coming on during the war zone years. There's so much going on, and it's a dangerous job for all three police departments. Transit cops were getting killed in the line of duty, if not seriously injured, as were housing cops, as were city cops. You start out with the city. Where was your initial NSU?
My NSU ended up in the 120 precinct in Staten Island.
Okay.
That's where I did my NSU. And then I was, from there, I ended up going to, believe it or not, the Staten Island Task Force. There was about 10 people in it at that time. It was very small. And then from there, I did a plainclothes detail with the Auto Larceny unit. Did that for about a year and a half, and then I entered the narcotics division with the Organized Crime Control Bureau. And I was a narcotics investigator.
Now, focusing on just the patrol years for a moment, there's a lot of great collars a patrolman can make. And I remember, I think it was Joe Patowski that said this in a great article I found on the Bomb Squad from 1994 in The Atlantic, where he said, and this was right, it was either him or Richie Hackford, the most dangerous job in the police department is the job of the patrolman, because he doesn't know, or she doesn't know, what they're walking into. And I think either the Patowski or Hackford line was, you could be talking about last night's ball game with your partner, and when you turn the corner, you're stumbling into a robbery in progress. You just never know. So tell me about some of the more notable encounters that you had on patrol, both good and maybe intense, that further drove that point home for you.
Well, when you're on patrol, especially in the early years when we were on patrol, you encountered everything, every kind of danger you could think of. 10-10 man with a gun, constantly. it didn't stop. It was very, very busy. Like as Paul could tell you, if you worked in that area of the 7-5 or in certain what we used to call A houses, it was busy. It's hard to say what was had higher. You got so used to responding to dangerous calls. One thing about being in the NYPD, cops can change, especially on patrol. You got to be able to change gears. You could go from a robbery in progress to an aided case where someone, a baby is choking. It's really hard to say. But if you're looking for like highlights of arrest, I've made arrests. I've involved arrests with John Gotti. I mean, yeah, we were involved arrests with him. He wasn't the John Gotti that you're thinking now, or that on top of the scale. He was just a drunk that ended up rear-ending an off-duty police officer from New Jersey and getting into a fist fight with him. And basically, unfortunately for John Gotti, the off-duty police officer was about 6'6" and about 300 pounds. So we didn't really have to do much except put him in handcuffs and bring him in.
There you go. And that was Gotti before, of course, the Castellano hit outside Sparks in '85.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Before he killed, no, that was after he killed a guy in Staten Island and named McBratney, I believe.
Yeah, they hauled him out of a bar pretending to
Right,
be
he killed him in
policemen
the bar.
and shot him in the back of the head.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. Scotty Wagner, my friend in the chat, of course, retired hostage negotiation detective, originally with the New York City Housing Police. Speaking of, good to see you, Scotty, and thank you for complimenting my casual look. Like I said at the top, of course, thanks to Kevin Barry for this shirt. Love the Bomb Squad shirt. Barry Goldbaum, as he was also known as. And, an interesting nickname for Kevin, but an appropriate one. At that, I always ask this to guys that, are starting out on patrol. And the question is the same when I'm interviewing cops and interviewing firemen. You always have somebody that's teaching you. You always have somebody that really helps you hone your craft by passing off their skill set to you, either directly by what they say to you or indirectly by what they do. Who would you credit for most teaching you how to be a good street cop?
A couple of people. One was a guy I worked with named Harry Donnelly from the 9th Precinct. Harry was a very low-key guy, high arrest guy. He just was a true professional. I mean, his style was great. I mean, he was he was phenomenal. And I tried to take a little of Harry, and then there was the late, I'm at a loss for his name. I'll tell you in a second. Bob, I lost his name. There was a great lieutenant out in Staten Island that was a boss's boss. I mean, he loved the cops. He could calm a situation down. I mean, he was amazing. He just had a gift, and not every cop has that gift. Sometimes you can hone it and get it a little better, but some people just can do it. And I think I was never really that smart, but I was good with people. I was real good with people, and I could read people well, and I could sort of finesse them a little bit, and that's what I learned from a lot of these guys. The best thing about being a cop is you don't have to be a rocket scientist. You have to have common sense. You have to sort of be able to try to read people, and then approach it that way.
Sergeant Tony Biondolilo is our guest tonight for Volume 33 of Tales from the Boom Room, profiles of the NYPD's arson, explosion, and bomb squad. Now, getting into the auto larceny years, I've covered this before. I don't think, and it bears covering again, of course, I don't think people realize just how lucrative, the auto theft ring anywhere you go is. People think of drugs, and that's pretty lucrative for those that deal in them at the high level and the low level. But cars, the same way you can always have drugs around to a degree, cars are always going to be around for a certain degree. And it's not just, but here's what, in my opinion, makes them more lucrative. It's not just the sale. It's the multifaceted sales that you can make on the black market. You can steal a car and sell it. You can also strip it down to bare parts. And
more money in parts.
Exactly.
More money in parts. Heavy equipment they would steal and send overseas.
Exactly.
I had a lot of fun in the auto larceny unit. We were a plainclothes unit. We were the only plainclothes auto larceny unit at the time authorized in the city. And that was because between Brooklyn South and Staten Island, we had the highest auto theft rate in the nation. Okay, it was ridiculous. I mean, we had individuals who we knew that were caught these, and I mean, it was just we sort of had a book we could go through. We knew the styles of who was doing what kind of thefts, what kind of cars they were taking. And people always think it's some junkie breaking into a car to steal it. Well, no, not always the case. A lot of times, one of the cases that I was fortunate to make an arrest on, I won't give you the guy's name, but he was worked for a Bilotti, Castellano's driver. They owned a collision shop. I won't even mention the shop, but a collision shop on the North Shore of Staten Island. That should be a hint to any Staten Island. Okay? They were actually using the police department's rotation tow program to steal other cars, with cars that they were assigned by the police department and entrusted by the police department. So we were able to sort of crack that ring. And that was a big thing. Car chases, everybody loves a car chase. This was prior to the days of, the sergeants calling off the chases. We had a chase of a fella that was a known car thief in Staten Island. He was notorious. Stole about 40 or 50 cars. We knew who he was. Okay, he'd leave a coil. He loved to have the cops in Staten Island chase him all over the place. Well, we caught him one day, and he was. Long story short, the chase ended up where he drove his car through a fence and into somebody's swimming pool. Okay, it wasn't a good day for me, and it wasn't a good day for my partner, but we got him. And he did a lot of time in jail. He stole a lot of cars.
When cops filmed in New York City, they missed a chance. They should have filmed with you guys, because they always think that Manhattan's the borough where everything happens, and that's true to a degree. But
yeah.
Look at that though. I mean, Staten Island. Imagine a night tour of 4 to 12 in the auto crime division. You have a chase like that, man. That's top television. Greatest show on earth, right?
The one thing about Staten Island, you got to know who the bad guys were, because it wasn't a big place.
Right.
Okay. So you could know the whole island, and you could know who the car thieves were. Who we used to, the NGs, the known gamblers. You got to know that when I was in narcotics, I worked Brooklyn South and Staten Island. I worked in a major case part of narcotics for Staten Island, and we knew who everybody was. I mean, it was just. Also, to be fair, a lot of the detectives, the old-time detectives that worked in Staten Island, they were probably some of the most knowledgeable detectives in the country, especially when it came to organized crime, because we did have a lot of organized crime figures here.
Oh, of course, that was their haven.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, since you did work on Staten Island, did you bear the brunt of the Richmond County Sheriff's Office jokes?
No, not really.
Good, because you guys were putting in work.
Yeah,
you guys were putting in work.
Listen, we did our. It is what it is. We did our thing. I laughed. I used to laugh because there was a stigma about, oh, you worked in Staten Island for a while. Well, I made 300 arrests on Staten Island in less than 7 years, so I think I did pretty good.
Exactly, I'd say.
Yeah, I think I did pretty good. It's not. Listen, police officers could be injured anywhere in this country. It could be in Staten Island. It could be in Westchester. It could be in Hollywood, or it could be in, like I say, anywhere. When the bullet hits you and you fall, you're dead, no matter where you land. You can land in, out in a big place in Long Island, out in Tottenville, or you can, or Manhattan. So, one thing about Staten Island, I will tell you, because I was from Brooklyn, and I didn't know anybody out here. And a lot of the cops that worked out here, they went to school here. So, we'd go and lock somebody up, and they go, oh, I can't lock that guy up. He's my cousin. So I was locking a lot of people up. I had no real connection with Staten Island. But what I did notice here is working that the district attorney's office was very tough, and the bad guys were afraid of that. So they more often than not would become very physical and want to fight you. So, and in those days we were paid to win, not lose. So that's, it was a totally different ball game, so it was, to be honest with you, as dangerous as it might have been back then, it was easier for us to deal with people because they sort of knew maybe I better not punch that cop, maybe I better not run away because they may catch me. And like we used to say, we were the biggest gang in New York City.
Yeah, of course. You had more resources than they ever could have dreamed of.
You can't outrun a radio.
Exactly. That's the point. Somebody made that reference, and it's true. It's actually an Indianapolis cop, not on this show, but in an episode of Cops I was watching. He's like, you can outrun the patrol car. You can't outrun the Motorola.
Right.
That's exactly it. They'll
Right.
always find you somehow. So, working, just one last note on auto larceny. This is a two-part question. I mentioned it earlier with parts and obviously the nice vehicles. You see a Bugatti, of course, the bad guy looks at that and salivates. But besides the basic surface level stuff, to catch a bad guy, you know what I'm going to say. You got to think like a bad guy sometimes.
Right.
So take me inside the mind of a car thief. What are they thinking about? Or if you were a car thief, what would you be looking for?
Well, I'll be honest with you. You mentioned the parts being lucrative. They had shopping lists. They had orders of what cars to take, where to bring them. In fact, they would. In those days, they were looking for like more of the sportier cars. They were going for Camrys. Camrys were a big car at the time. Honda Accords were big, but they were also going for these high-end Oldsmobiles. These what do they call them? This big engines. I just can't think of it. They were going for all these high-end cars, and a lot of times they were just parts. One example, we had a crew going for parts that we knew. We watched them weeks. And then one night, they grabbed a couple of cars. They had walked into the South Beach area of Staten Island, where there's a lot of high weeds. It's near the water.
Right.
And the weeds were very high. And what they did was they had an operation that they brought in with a van, and they brought about 8 cars in, and they were chopping up these cars and taking them apart. And it's funny, we had surrounded them. They didn't even know we were there. We had aviation coming. When aviation came, the wind from the rodent actually opened up the weeds, and it was like they couldn't believe it, But you're talking about these guys were all great at their craft, if you want to call it a craft, and they made a lot of money. Okay, they stole cars to order or for parts.
Now, and as I've often said ad nauseum on the show, but again, it bears repeating. It's so sad to look at these individuals because they're so talented, but they're using that talent and making all the wrong choices with it. Imagine if they actually applied their minds to doing this the legit way, how far they could get.
A lot of them were great mechanics.
Yeah.
But, they could tear apart a car in no time. And
Yeah.
put one back together if they had to, but they were more into tearing them apart.
Right. And it's unfortunate, but you know what? You make those choices and there's either good or bad. There's consequences to them, and they understand. I will say back then, now it's a lot different for reasons that are well documented that we don't need to get into. But back then, they, at least to their credit, they knew the game. And when they were caught, it was like, hey, listen, I know what I was getting myself into. You got me. It was business. It wasn't personal.
Right. It wasn't personal. And it's funny you mentioned that, because one of the cases I told you about, that chop shop, was an individual, I won't mention his name, but an individual who I had arrested, and he was a very large individual. And in those days, when you stole the GM automobile and you chopped the column, at night, you couldn't get the brights to go off. So that's how I spotted him. All of a sudden, I see a high-end Chevy Super Sport coming down with its brights on. I looked in the window, and there he was. Okay. Short chase, caught him, put his hands behind his back, not a problem. And this was a guy that, I'll tell you what, if he didn't want to go easy, he could have hurt us. It would have been a bad day. It would have been a very bad day, because he was a very powerful man, big man, over 300 pounds. But when you say, acting professional, when it went to trial in Staten Island, they had asked me what his demeanor was. I said, well, he acted very professionally, So the defense attorney went crazy. He said, you're trying to infer that this is his profession? I said, no, you asked me how he was, and I'm telling you, he gave us no problem, and he was very cordial and professional in his line, and as we were in our line.
Yeah. You know what? And again, you can almost, I remember Mike McCory mentioning this, a great E-Man out of Truck One, in a documentary on ESU from the late 70s. There was a guy that, was holding up a brothel with a shotgun. This was 70s New York, right? And he said, I would have had more respect for the guy if he would have just said, you know what, you got me, baby. Too bad I couldn't get away. I don't like the guys that get all scared when we come up and want to all of a sudden start being nice. No. You know what you were doing beforehand. Why the sudden change in demeanor when you see the badge and you see us with our firepower, literally and figuratively, compared to yours? But, you know, like I said, I'm not giving them credit for what they're doing, but at least if you're going to go down like a man.
Right.
And they did in those days.
You know, different code. I'll give you an example. When John Gotti was arrested and he was brought into the precinct, the first thing he did was spit at the desk officer, who was a lieutenant. And he looked at the desk officer's name. The desk officer had an Irish last name. And then he looks at my last name. And he goes, he sees my last name is Italian. He goes, hey, cousin, I can deal with you, but I ain't going to deal with him. You know, that mentality of, you know.
Racism. It's called what it is.
Yeah, crazy.
Racism.
Just kooky. It was just strange. It was strange.
Oh, Gotti, he was
he wasn't that dapper that night.
No, and it's funny because Sammy Gravano said this, not to me, but on a separate, I think on a documentary, he was talking about this. One night, Gotti was telling him at that social club where he would hide out in the old lady's apartment and conduct his business there, that how is this message?
The Ravenite.
The Ravenite, thank you. You know, he was saying about something. How is this going to translate? How is this message going to translate to our people? And Gravano looked at him like he had 5 heads. He's like, our people, John, we're gangsters. You know, so he really thought he was a head of state at one point. He had that much power.
That's what happens. You know, it's, everybody thinks people in organized crime, especially Italian. I'm a full-blooded Sicilian. John Gotti actually really couldn't be a made man, to be honest with you.
He couldn't. Wow.
Tradition of the mafia, because he wasn't a Sicilian. Okay, but obviously it changed. And listen, they were never nice. They put my grandfather out of business in the 1920s, and then they were called really the Black Hand. Okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
They weren't even. We didn't use the term Cosa Nostra or mafia. You know, it was the Black Handers. And and they preyed on their own people. If you think about it, they preyed on their own people. Just like if you look at drug dealers in certain areas of the city, right? Who are they killing? Their own people. Their own people. We seem to prey on our own. So, and it's not a good thing.
Yeah, and it's funny because the similarities between Italian and Spanish, right? Me being Hispanic, you being Italian.
Same culture.
Same culture.
Yeah. That was the first
Pretty
thing
woman.
I learned, too. The guy told me, he says, an old time, he said, you go into a Latin guy's house and you berate him in front of his family, you're going to have a bad day.
You are.
He said, you treat him with respect. You're going to walk outside. He's going to put his hands behind his back.
That's
and
it.
He was right. And he was right.
He's right. Absolutely. And it's funny because we have great food. Both of our cultures have great food. We have very beautiful women. You know, I've always said if I don't marry a Latina one day, I'm going to marry an Italian woman because I love them just as much too. They don't love me back yet, but that's a different story for a different day. Yeah. So, and then we call it in Spanish, sangre caliente, the hot blood. You know, so it's funny.
No, we have some, most of us, unfortunately, have tempers, especially Sicilians.
Oh, God. You should have seen me during the ALCS with the Yankees, you know, further testament to that. But I'll tell you, you know, quick note on the Black Hand. That's kind of how the bomb squad originated because Petrosino, Lieutenant, just a quick note for the audience.
Yes. Petrosino,
yep.
Right. He basically, you know how they used to call for Petrosino when they needed it? He was known, they'd call for the Dago. That's what the police commissioner would say, call for the Dago. You know, he actually started out with what was known as a white wing. You know what a white wing is?
No, tell me.
Turn of the century. He was the guy, like you see in a cartoon, with the shovel sweeping the street.
Yep.
And the trash can. That's how Petrosino started.
Wow.
Okay, believe it or not. But he caught the eye of not only Teddy Roosevelt, but of the police commissioner at the time, because he spoke Italian. He was sort of known in the neighborhood, you know, as a guy that really took care of business. He was a tough guy. You know, people don't realize he was a tough guy. So obviously there were very few Italians, right, on the bomb squad. You know, in 1900, now we say 1903 is when it was started. Okay, they really got the name the bomb squad for the New York Times gave the name the bomb squad, actually, indirectly, yeah. it was the Italian squad. And actually, he had 5 guys, and only 4 of them were Italian, who could speak Italian, and 1 was French, who could speak French. Okay? And he basically, in those days, was able to take care of business. If you think about it, when we talk about counterterrorism today, and we have people all over the world doing things, he was an intelligence gatherer. I mean, his methods today, they'd work very well, but they wouldn't be well accepted. Okay? But if you think about it, the use of plain clothes, infiltrating, using Italians to break into the Black Hand, you weren't going to get an Irish cop to get into, a circle of Italians. Okay? And there was a lot. There's a lot of names in the bomb squad people don't know. There was another detective who came later on named Amedeo Polagini. The guy was unbelievable. He went up against all these Italian anarchists. Okay, but Petrosino laid the groundwork, and within a few short years, there was actually an office in Brooklyn too. Sergeant Antonio Vagaris was in charge of the Brooklyn part of the Italian squad. It was a lot. It became a lot bigger than 4 people. And then obviously Petrosino, in 1909, he goes to Italy, goes to Sicily. It's supposed to be a secret trip, and everybody knows the story. The mayor is ranting and raving how his number 1 guy is over in Italy now, trying to investigate the Black Handers. So, and unfortunately, he was murdered there.
Yeah,
One of the largest funerals in New York City history.
I was going to say exactly that. Just a couple of quick notes on him. He was short. So the NYPD back then had a height requirement. Yeah, they bypassed it for him.
Get on, but because of his he was built like a bull.
Yeah.
And he spoke the language, and he knew all the players on the street, and they were able to transition him into the police department. In those days, you paid to get on the police department. People don't realize that. You paid an alderman $500, whatever it was, the equivalent to $500, and then maybe you got into the police department. It wasn't like the civil service. Let's go. There's a big test done for the NYPD. It was different. It was different then. So they had more latitude who they could bring in and who they couldn't bring in. Okay. Big history with the bomb squad, not only with Italians, with the German saboteurs and the whole thing. We can keep going on. Black Tom Island, 1914, right? At the time, Thomas Tunney was the CO of the bomb squad. Thomas Tunney, I mean, that's a name. Look him up. You'll be amazed what that guy had done, Thomas Tunney. In fact, he had, during the First World War, he took about 18 guys, and they sort of left the police department, and they trained bomb squads all over the country, military bomb squads, okay? And they came back about 3 or 4 years later, like in 1918, and they weren't treated very well. But Tunney in himself is a historic figure who doesn't get a lot of credit. He really doesn't. If you research Thomas Tunney, he was an amazing man. I don't know if you've ever heard of the St. Patrick's bombing, where the bomb squad foiled the bombers.
Yes.
They were laying the bombs. Well, that Tunney was in charge then. And that information came from Amedeo Polagini, Detective Polagini, yes, because he had infiltrated parts of the Black Hand, okay? And he was a marked man, but, he lived to tell the tale.
No, of course. No, a lot of history. And that's the thing, Petrosino, just another note on him. He was a history maker in life and in death because he's the only, and hopefully it stays this way, he's the only American police officer to ever die in the line of duty overseas to this day. And he was the first casualty. There's 6 plaques on the bomb squad's memorial wall. As I said before, he's the first one. And I think it was March 11th, 1909. Back to your career real quick, just before I touch on OCCB. You made sergeant. Tell me about making sergeant. Did you always want to ascend in the ranks when you got on the job, or was it just a happy accident?
I wasn't really a rank guy. I mean, to be honest with you, I was sort of I told you, I was good with people. I wasn't afraid to talk on the radio. So I sort of was like and you remember, I came on, I was 28 years old. I'd been in the military, been in military police. I was a little cocky, and I was able to do things. I took the sergeant's test. I passed. I wasn't a rocket scientist. I used my veterans points. That helped me quite a bit. So I got in like in the third or fourth round. So I ended up a sergeant in Greenwich Village, right? And that was the best thing that ever happened, being a sergeant. Did a 2 years on patrol. We had something called the Cabaret Squad. If you look, there's a couple of documentaries. I'm trying to think of his name. He did it for WOR when the Greenwich Village was out of control in like 1990, 1991. And he did a documentary called Take Back the Village, where he stayed with us for a week. And I mean, back then, though, we had the support of the people in the village. We had the support of the community boards, and the cops in the 6th precinct, everybody says, it's the 6th precinct, it's small. They did more physical fighting than most cops would do anywhere. When I tell you the guys that I worked with, they were brawling every weekend. I'm talking about knockdown, drag out fights, but our job was to win, and we won. And we always won. And then about 2 years after that, I became the anti-crime sergeant. I stayed there for the next almost 8 years.
On patrol, did you work the same tours as Michael Mixon?
Yeah, did I know? Of course I knew Mike. Yeah, Mike, me and Mike actually went to Huntsville together, to bomb school together. But I knew Mike before because when Mike was doing midnights, but then he went to anti-crime, he worked with another sergeant, Billy Abramo, great guy, and a great team he had. And I became the other sergeant in anti-crime. So I knew Mike very well. I got to know him very well. And one night I was playing cards with a couple of the guys in one of the guys' houses from anti-crime. I get a phone call. Mike got shot.
In 96.
Mike got shot. I said, where is he? He's at St. Vincent's Hospital here in Staten Island. So obviously I leave the card game. I was winning too, but I left the card game. I get there and he's sitting up. He's asking people for a cigarette. He's got a bullet in him. He's asking people, he's gone what's with all. But Mike was that, talk like this. Let me tell you something. He was a quiet hero in a lot of ways. Not only that, I saw him come back after the building collapsed 9/11. If you saw that boy's body all bruised up, Mike was quite a guy. Even back then, Mike was a good guy. His anti-crime days, a lot of fun. A funny guy. Guy. The rookies would come. He would torture them. It was fun being a cop around Mike, and he was a very knowledgeable guy, a good guy, and like I say, he was a Marine. What can I say?
And it's funny. I know he's not a podcast guy. I respect that. That's fine. But man, if he ever changes his mind one day, I'd love to get him on this show, man.
Let's look, Mike. I'll tell you something. Mike Mike was a sergeant's dream. He made you look good. Fortunately, a lot of guys that we had in the 6th precinct, especially in anti-crime, in those days you got to choose your guys. They say, "Oh, you guys, you do great." They pay me compliments. No, pay them the compliment. I'm the guy sitting in the back seat. I may run around a little bit and do a little fighting, but they're the guys. They're the guys that really doing all the work. Okay. So I was very fortunate, and a lot of us that worked in that command. There was a lot of great people in the 6th precinct. As small as it was, there was a lot going on, and the food was great.
I don't doubt it. There's a wide array of cuisine specifically in that area because there's a wide array of different people in that area. Talk about diversity. Just a quick note on anti-crime. You guys were the precinct anti-crime squad, but the street crime also exists at the same time. And sometimes they would come over since it was a citywide unit and stay with you guys for a little bit. How'd you get along with them?
Not a problem. It's not a problem. They if the few times that they would come over, it would be for something like there'd be a certain type of pattern that we'd have to work together. But they were able to make their own collars in other places. They really, they weren't really intruding on us. To be honest with you, we made plenty of collars in anti-crime. You know what I mean? And we really didn't have a friction with them. To be honest with you, a lot of people I know they say that, but nah, not there. We also worked very good with the anti-crimes in the 10th precinct, the 13th precinct, the 1st precinct. We were all good. We shared the same division on the radio. So we would hook up a lot of times and say, "Oh, we're following a couple of these guys and whatever. It looks like they broke into one car. Looks like they're going to take another car. Maybe they're going to do a robbery." And, it was teamwork. One thing about Manhattan South, it was teamwork. I have to admit it was teamwork.
I want to touch on Organized Crime Control Bureau because, again, such an interesting beat. And I've talked about this before with guys who are in OCCB. When people think of organized crime, naturally, because of the way it's portrayed in media with shows like The Sopranos and movies like Goodfellas, they think of the mob. But it's beyond that. There's gangs in every culture. We talked about it. There's Spanish drug dealers, there's black mobsters, there's Jewish mobsters, Irish mobsters, and all of that in a city of 8 million people. Again, if it's classified, don't tell me about that part of it with these investigations. But as far as the different array of gangs that you guys worked on, because you were doing wiretaps too. Tell me about some of the more notable cases.
On drug deals. But did they have connections with organized crime figures? Yeah. But the organized crime figures they were sort of dealing with were sort of wannabes or made guys on a lower level. And they were basically patsies for them doing the work, you know, selling an 8-ball of Coke here, an 8-ball here or there, you know, and we try to build it up into more and more. But yeah, we were able to do, thank God the Richmond County District Attorney's Office. They were very pro law enforcement. They were good to us. I could tell you a time I walked in, we used to arraign our own prisoners in the early days. So I'll cut to the chase. He shouldn't have thrown a punch at my partner because my partner was about 6'5" and about 270 pounds. But he's not the guy. He's the easy guy. I'm the little Italian guy with the temper. So unfortunately, the guy comes in with, you know, we have to take him to the hospital because he's
markings.
Yeah, well, you look at my nose. He just about broke my nose. So, you know, he wasn't, you know, he comes in and once the judge saw all this and heard all this, he's basically got off the bench and started screaming. They loved us in Staten Island in those days. They loved the cops because they lived here. They knew us. And, I mean, it was a great system. I mean, you know, when I went to Brooklyn and other places, it was good, but it wasn't that personal because it was large.
Right.
You know what I mean? We knew all the DAs. You know, it was good, especially in the Organized Crime Control Bureau. I worked with one of the 2 DAs that would handle all our cases. You know, and they were very, very good.
You know, if they weren't living in Long Island or Rockland County, I don't know what it's like now because I remember Amanda Farinacci telling me this, the current FDNY press secretary, when she was on the show, that it's getting a little bit more expensive. But that's the one borough in the city, cops and firemen alike can settle down in because it's not, at least back then, it wasn't that hard on the wallet.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Staten Island is, you talk about Staten Island, it's notorious for, you know, we're all cops. My block alone here, fireman next door, 2 cops I know. One is a chief. They're all retired. You know, here across the street. It's just, you know, it's a haven for civil servants. You know?
There you go. Exactly. I've always said if I ever did move to the city, I would probably try to settle in either Staten Island or Queens because I like the city to visit. I can't imagine, and I don't know. I talked about it with Steve Burbridge when he was on. Same thing with Danny Richards. They said Danny Richards loved living in Manhattan. I don't. But again, he seemed like a fast-paced guy. I'm not. I don't know how people can handle that.
Danny was the best. I got to know Danny even before I got to the bomb squad because he's probably a 6th precinct guy.
Right.
And I would run into him every day. In fact, a lot of these guys sort of prepared the way for me. You know, I mean, they were always telling me, why don't you put in, in my day, you didn't have to go for an interview for, like, I was offered a position in the squad in the 6th precinct. I didn't have to go for an interview if I wanted to leave to possibly go to internal affairs or whatever. It was different then. That wasn't starting then. I loved being out on the street. I loved it. I loved Manhattan. I loved the fast pace of it. And I didn't want to sit upstairs in a suit, you know, doing that kind of stuff, you know. But the more and more I got to experience the guys in the bomb squad, the Danny Riches, you know, I could go on and on. Richie T, Kevin Barry's, all of them. I mean, you know, in my 18th year, I said, you know something, I'm going to put in for this thing. And I did. You know, after 18 years, I put in for it. So they basically, I would say, especially Danny and guys like Danny, they sort of were my segue into the bomb squad. Mark Torrey, the lieutenant there.
Right.
And it's funny. I think, if I remember correctly, I was on the board when we interviewed Paulie. right? And Paulie was a star. I mean,
One truck guy.
He was great.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy is just, and the irony of it is I got to the bomb squad, and then my son, who was a detective, and then a detective in the 6th precinct, was going to go to homicide, and Paulie convinced him to go to the bomb squad. Best move he ever made. And I thank Paulie for that all the time. I thank him all the time. I mean, it's a funny thing being in that 6th precinct. It's a segue. A lot of 6th precinct guys sometimes get to the bomb squad. It's only because the guys get to know the guys.
Right.
Yes, and it's back then. And I'm sure even now, things change. I mean, there's not a lot of Paulie Pericones out there, and I don't say that to blow smoke, but it's the truth. Paulie had a work ethic. I think I was first sergeant. We were the B team. He did not stop work. He'd come in, check the trucks. He's cleaning. He's cooking. He's going nonstop. He was a pleasure to be around.
Of course, and he's a great guy. I love Paul. He's been on the show multiple times, and I know he's tuned in tonight. And he told me this story off the air about Jimmy Carano, another great guy. That to his work ethic, right? A testament to Paulie's work ethic. They were cleaning up at the range, and they were stacking all these garbage bags. And Jimmy Carano from the range calls the Manhattan office. He says, "You gotta stop! These garbage bags are going to the roof." And Paulie's like, call maintenance guys and they'll pick them up, but they were literally cleaning the place up to the point where the trash almost didn't fit,
Paulie did not. Yeah, he was a clean freak, but I'll tell you,
as am I.
He was good at his job, and he was good because he knew when you had downtime, you could do other things. We'd go out, Paulie, we try stuff. We'd go out with Ray Claire and Kenny Dean, and we were at the range. We try to shoot the pan in different ways. We look at different. We'd like to play with, you know what I'm saying. And Paulie was good. It's good. Paulie was good with that. Paulie was good basically with everything.
No doubt. And Paulie, by the way, speaking of before I continue, if you talk to Kenny Dean at all, give him my number and tell him I'm looking for him so he can give me a call. I'd like to have him on the show. But that being said, I guess we can get to the bomb squad now. This is Tales from the Boom Room, Volume 33, Profiles of the NYPD's Arson, Explosion, and Bomb Squad. It's 2000, and it's a squad in a little bit of a transition. You get there. Mike Omixon gets there too. Brian Toohey, after a lengthy stint there, he retires about a couple months after you get there. And there was a change in leadership. Don Sadawi retired that October. And with that, Mike White retired too. And in came Jerry Sheehan. So it's a little bit of a switch around for the squad. So just before I get to 01 and that terrible day, just tell me about your first year in the squad.
Well, obviously, the sad part was 9/11. But when I first got there, remember, I was a guy from patrol. I was a little more relaxed. There was suit and tie. I really, was not a suit and tie. I had to go out and buy suits and whatever. I used to come in. Poor Lieutenant Sheehan, I guess he never dealt with anybody like me because I put Dean Martin music on, Frank Sinatra. I try to liven up the office a little bit, but he was a good guy. But remember, he was a squad guy for a long time, so he sort of ran a tight ship. He came from Arson, Explosion, good guy, fair guy, and he wanted everybody, like in suit and tie. And the more I was exposed to running out on these jobs, I said, this is really not a suit and tie job. I mean, guys would. I remember Kenny Dean. We zipped up his pants. We ripped his pants. Every time he was putting on the suit, guys going for, we really, but I got it. We were in the detective bureau, and that's what we had to do. The 9/11 happens, and then it just was, a disaster. I mean, Danny, God rest his soul. I saw Danny the night he left. Danny had just come back from bereavement leave too. His brother had passed away, who was a Vietnam vet, who was a quadriplegic. And Danny was an Army Ranger. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, he was.
Funny.
I know that.
I have a picture of him with his helmet. It says 228. That was our command number in the bomb squad, 228. Yeah. So, but yeah, I saw him his last night, and unfortunately, and the story I always tell, it was about 4 weeks after when they said, okay, we're not finding anybody. Everybody's gone. So we got to start moving on. We got to start declaring people dead. Lieutenant Sheehan and myself escorted Danny's brother I think his name was Jim, if I remember correctly, to Danny's apartment. People have told you about Danny, right? He was an organizational genius.
Yep.
This guy was an organizational genius. I'll tell you, I can't even get into it. And he was sharp. He was a sharp guy. We go into the apartment. There's soft music playing. So, we're going to look for whatever. We'll look for Will and whatever. So his brother sits down at his desk. And the first thing he does is he opens the drawer, the right-hand drawer. And what does he see? We see Danny's shield, his rack with all his medals on it. And right underneath it is his Detectives Endowment Association last will and testament. I think Danny had a feeling he wasn't coming home that day. I really do. I really do, unfortunately. He was a great guy. And like I say, they found Danny on Good Friday, the following Good Friday. He was one of the last people to be found. And, it was tough. A lot of guys got hurt. Stephen Burbage, who I just saw upstate, he got hurt. Michael Mixon, who never even complained once. I tried to force him to make a line of duty. He didn't even want to do that. A lot of guys did, but a lot of guys did get hurt and have to retire.
Yeah.
And
Danny McNally got hurt.
Yeah, Dan got hurt. Dan, another good guy. Yeah, Dan. The two Dannys were, and Dan was an Air Force guy. He was an Air Force OSI guy.
He's been on this show. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a good guy. And I used to tease him. I used to say, I was an investigator. We used to do more arrests than used to make an OSI. Yeah, I used to tease him. But Dan is a sharp guy, another sharp guy. Yep. Those two guys were very, very sharp and good people. You could learn a lot from them, willing to share. Especially, I came there from patrol. I had guys, I was fortunate. Dennis Mulcahy was there. First thing he does is hand me all kinds of wires and batteries, explaining circuits to me and stuff. Even though I'm the sergeant, I mean, I was fortunate that there was a lot of good people there when I was there. They didn't last long because after 9/11, they were forced to retire.
Right. A lot of good guys
It didn't
walked
last
away.
long, but I still had plenty of good people there. So I was real lucky when I got to the bomb squad.
Oh, you mentioned Dennis Mulcahy. It'd be nice if you actually came on the show, Dennis. Just saying.
Dennis is a saint. I'm pretty sure that he needs one more miracle and he becomes a saint. One might have been a card trick, but I'm not sure.
Good guy. He's just busy. I mean, he's got Project Children. So, I mean, I speak to his wife every now and then, and she's like, I think you should give up in the Irish program. I'm like, I never give up. So, hopefully I can.
He's quite a legend in the bomb squad.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Good
He was
man.
there a long time. He was there a very long time.
And a good man. I mean, just always smiling. He always knew if you had a problem, he'd tell me, he'd see me with a look on his face, and he knew exactly what was wrong. And he was just a good guy.
Yeah.
Good guy. Great guy. A lot of them were.
Of course. I will backtrack for a second. I know Eddie Hayes, who's been on the show as well, another great guy. He retired. Eddie Hayes. He retired in 1999.
Because I was in a precinct. Yeah.
Okay. So he retired in 99 as a sergeant, one of the sergeants in the bomb squad. Right. Was his retirement, was that the one that opened up your opportunity to get in?
Probably. It opened up too, because also Brian Coughlin got there right before me, a couple of months before me. I don't know if you met Brian. Great.
I know Brian, yeah. Haven't met him in person.
It's funny, Brian indirectly inherited, I sort of had to fill in for a little bit on Danny's work, which thank God he was a genius. Everything was set up, but I wasn't really that good at it. But
the intel coordinator role?
He was another guy, good organizational guy. I mean, he was good at it. Young guy, but good at it. And but I think that that was one of them that opened up. I'm trying to think who else was there. Renzi, I think, left too.
Guy Renzi.
Sergeant Renzi. He was another nice guy. I used to go up and talk to him all the time.
Yeah.
Sergeant Renzi. In fact, a funny story. You mentioned Lieutenant White. I said, one of these days I'm going to be working for you. He goes, while I'm here, you're never going to get to the bomb squad. Right? He said, I'll get there. He always teased me. Another nice guy. He was a surfer. He loved to go surfing. I don't know if he told you that.
No, I haven't had him on the show yet, but I see him on Facebook, and every other photo is him surfing. He loves it. No, and good for him. I mean, listen, he after a career that he had, any kind of downtime is certainly well earned. This is volume 33 of Tales from the Boom Room. Our guest tonight is Sergeant Tony Biondolilo. And it is funny, to your point on Danny, and just a last note on 9/11. I think Jimmy Carano was in the apartment with you with Dennis Mulcahy, if I'm not mistaken. And it's the same thing.
That was later. That at the first time that we went in to get Danny's stuff was with
his brother,
Lieutenant Sheehan, and his brother. But yes, they were in other times. We had to go. There was other things that had to be done.
Right. And I appreciate, you know what? It goes to show the camaraderie, even after a member dies. And this part touched me, is that guys would go, and I think Jimmy told me this, they would check his apartment and just make sure that it was exactly as he left it.
Yes, without a doubt.
No, you guys did right by him. You guys did. And he died a hero. I would have loved to have him on the show, man. I've said that numerous times. I don't know if he would have done it, but
he like I say, I knew him for years before I actually worked in the bomb squad, because, I was up there. The sergeant's locker room was right by the office. I was always in there talking with Renzi or him or whatever. And Danny was just, let me tell you, that guy, his hair, not a hair out of place. Not a hair out of place.
And it's funny. I had Joe Dolan on just now, and I'll get to the new guys that came in a second. He came in summer of 2001 to Joe. And Joe took Danny, was one of the guys that drove with Danny down to the Trade Center. And Faith Beiser was there answering the phones because that was Danny's job. And he pulls down a pair of boots from his locker, and he looked at Joe excitedly, and he said, "I got these boots at the last World Trade Center. Now I'm finally going to get the chance to wear them." And Faith Beiser looks at him and says, "I need some help answering the phones." He's like, "Oh, no. I'm going down there."
So, well, yeah, there was a lot going on. There were, and that day, I'll be honest with you, we had immediately Nassau and Suffolk. They sent us guys with equipment, and we were able to sort of match them up. One of theirs with one of ours. Yep. There was almost 1,000 jobs that day. Most of them were unfounded because everybody now everything's
paranoia.
A bomb. Everybody had the truck. Every piece of trash is now a bomb. So, but they were running like crazy. But Nassau and Suffolk were. The bomb community in general is a very close-knit community. I mean, when I was going with Homeland Security and I would do these events, these exercises out in California with their bomb squad, they didn't even know me, but just being a bomb guy, it like opens the door for you,
Right. It's an exclusive community.
I'm retired. They said, "Oh yeah, you want to cap up." But my point is, it's a close-knit community, and especially like in the bomb squad in New York, it was very close in the office. It was a great place to work.
Oh, of course. And, it's interesting because after that day, it's not just, as I've covered before, it's not just dealing with losing Danny and not just the good detective and the good person he was, but obviously all that knowledge too that died with him that day. Now it's the added work. The work has skyrocketed because there's a natural fear and paranoia after something like this, to what you just said. And you have new members coming in. You got Joe Dolan coming in. You got Paulie, like we mentioned earlier, Ronnie Richards, Steve Lanos, all these emergency service guys coming in, Glenn Osterman. And it's tough because even though they ended up being great techs and they ended up really being true assets to the squad, now you got to break them in. Now you got to train them in addition to all this skyrocketing work that's going on. So tell me about your 2002, your 2003 in the bomb squad.
2002, 2003, we were obviously from October till summertime running back and forth between, if we weren't covering the city doing jobs, we were either at the landfill. We had an office at the landfill with the recovery effort and also at the Trade Center. And what I was doing, basically, being a new guy, I was fortunate. I had guys like Joe Patowski, another guy. He helped me immensely. So I was able to sort of get better at it. Traditionally, the sergeants in the bomb squad, we sort of run interference. So the guys will always tease us. They'll say, "We do all the real work." And in essence, they do. I mean, but there wasn't a sergeant there who had a problem with suiting up, if need be. But you never stepped on the guys, Right. They wanted to be there. They wanted to be in that suit. As much as I wanted to do it, every once in a while, I remember Tommy Sullivan, another great guy. He'd say, okay, go in the suit. You know, that was for me. That was so I could get better. You know what I mean? At it. See, the more you do these things, no matter what they are, like I used to tell some emergency guys would sometimes tell me, hey, Tone, I'm sorry we called you for this. I go, why are you sorry? I said, every time we respond, right? We respond like it's game day. You're doing it, we're doing it. Because one day they're going to open that box and it ain't going to be good. I said, so, you know, the more we do it, the more bomb techs get into a suit, the better they are in a suit. The more they deal with, sometimes they can't always be in a suit. That's a decision that they have to make. And one thing about, since I traveled around to bomb squads, like Paulie's doing now, he'll tell you, they didn't even talk years ago about the hand entry. Only the NYPD did hand entry. And people just say, well, why do you guys have to do that? I said, because you can't get a robot 14 stories up when the elevator ain't working. You know what I mean? You know, they got to do things. I mean, and sometimes you're in a crowd. I think I remember, what was it, St. Patrick's Day? I think it was me, Paulie, Ray, and we had to clear packages on the street. And like Paulie just went to work. There was no getting a bomb suit on. You throw a bomb suit on, and you got 10,000 people there. You basically evaluated it. We did what we had to do, and you make it work. And like I say, there's no guarantee in anything that a bomb technician does. You know, there's just no guarantee. But thankfully, most of the time, it's nothing. Thankfully.
That's true. That's true. And you know what? I think it's a testament to you guys for what you did in that aftermath in 2002, because like I said, it's not just the new guys coming in who ended up being the next generation of the bomb squad. Yeah. Like I said, doing a really great job. It's all that knowledge that left, because not just with Danny's death, that in 2002, you mentioned some of them. Richie Teamsman retired. Paul Yerkou retired. Kevin Berry retired. Dennis Mulcahy retired. Jerry Sheehan retired. So you had all these really smart guys walk out that door. It's like, holy crap, how are we going to replace them? And even though each guy has their own unique flavor, again, these new guys came in.
You know, you really couldn't replace those guys. Right. It's like we had an old timers day once. Paulie, I don't know if Paulie ever told you the story, but one day let him tell you the story. Paulie was there. There's a bunch of us there, and we had a lot of old timers there.
Is this the 100th anniversary?
This was right after.
Okay.
I'm trying to. I think it was 2000. We did this maybe in 2004. Maybe it was right in that time. But we had an old timers day. We're blowing stuff up at the range with them, showing them new equipment and stuff. Now, some of these guys were 80 years old. Now these guys had nothing. We lived. I used to tell guys, no. Everybody loves the NYPD bomb squad. They think we're hot stuff. But you know something? We're riding off their backs. These guys did a lot of stuff with their hands. They didn't have a lot of equipment. Okay, and there were more actual bombings then, right? You know, you had the weathermen, you had all this other stuff going on. I mean, there was a lot going on, and we did lose a lot. But believe it or not, like even that one old timers day. The old timers would tell you stories, and you got to learn. Like I never knew that in the 60s, some of these anarchists per se, they would take pipes and put human excrement in the pipe and keep them for about a month, capped up, and it builds pressure inside. So when the bomb squad would get there, they knew in those days a lot of times they opened those things manually, and it gave a new term to getting, I won't say it, something faced, you know? But it was a little like, I learned it from an old timer, laughing, and a lot of guys did that. We learned a lot from them, so we at least had that. But I'll tell you something, the guys like Paulie, Ronnie Richards, and other, Ray Buckowitz, those guys could build devices. I mean, they were good at it. They loved it. They were good at it. I remember Ronnie, God rest his soul, was trying to rig up the urinal so something would pop when you moved away. Like when it flushes with the flushing device. He was just another great guy. He was very close with Paulie. They were good buddies, and everybody loved Ronnie. I mean, Ronnie was he couldn't say enough. It's odd that two Richards would die as a result of 9/11, right?
Yeah, one on 9/11 and one because of it years later.
One got a death sentence on 9/11.
Yeah.
He just didn't die that day.
Right.
That's
That's
how
true.
I looked at it.
That's true.
He was, he got it on 9/11, and it just took long enough for him to die, unfortunately.
Yeah. I wish you would have had more time. And just a quick shout out to our friends in the live chat. I see you, Diane B, and you, Dizzy, as well at U1969. He has great fire service videos on his channel, so go check him out. Ronnie, I wish, because he had 18 years in the PD and he had to retire because of his cancer. I would have liked to have seen that guy have more time, because he had a lot of really, again, knowledgeable guy, another former E-man. I think he was a 5-truck guy. I think if you would have given that guy a full 25, 30-year career, I would have liked to have seen what he would have done. And I never knew him, so I can only imagine how much of a pleasure it was for you guys to know him and work with him.
You know why he was so good? Because he always had I can't say the word here. You told me. He had a grin on his face. You know, the eating grin?
Yep.
He always had that. He was always smiling. Hey, Sarge, how you doing? A great guy. Everybody loved him. And I think he was so relaxed that his mind, he was... he was just like I say, he was a great device builder. Him and Ray Buckowitz, like they would booby trap things for the next team coming in. Hey, buddy, his big thing. Hey, buddy, Paulie just reminded me. Hey, buddy. Hey, buddy. Everything was hey, buddy. I loved them. I loved. Listen. I loved them all, but I hate to say you have favorites, but there's some they were more like I think me. They like to joke around a little bit, serious, but they like to joke around.
Yeah, levity helps in a job like that. You need to laugh because it's high tension stuff.
In police work in general, you have to, sort of ease up a little bit because, everybody has memories, and you had some are good, some are bad, and some are in between. But you sort of you fight it off with other things. You joke around. You do things, you do corny things. You tease other guys. Sometimes I used to tease one of the guys in the squad. I didn't realize it was bothering him so much till his cousin told me, and then I stopped because I teased everybody. You ask Paulie, I would say things that today probably
wouldn't fly.
Wouldn't. And I was the EEO coordinator. Yeah, so that was a joke. But no, but you know what I'm saying. But you could do things like that in those days. It was different. It
wasn't malicious. It was with love.
No, and in a smaller unit, you sort of get to know who. And everybody was. When I was there, everybody was a pretty good sport. Everybody. So I was lucky. I had a charmed career. I worked with the greatest people in the world. Whether I worked in the 120 precinct, Captain Roosh, Lieutenant Roosh is who I modeled myself after. I couldn't think of his name. Shame on me. He was the best cop I ever knew. Even when he was a captain, if it hit the fan, no matter what it was, if he showed up, you were happy.
Right.
Yeah, Captain Roosh was, he was Lieutenant Roosh when I first met him. His son was on a job to a mountain, another good guy. But his dad, I think of his dad often. I mean, myself and a couple of other supervisors that knew him, that worked plain clothes out in Staten Island or whatever. If you ask them, that's the one name that comes up. That's Captain Roosh. Yeah.
There's another guy I want to ask you about before I get to that. The 100th anniversary, in 2003, and it's bittersweet because there's certain guys like Brian Murray, obviously like Socha and Lynch, like Danny Richards that could not be there because they lost their lives heroically. But there was plenty of guys that could be there. And at the range, Jeff Oberdeer told me this story about trying to put this together. I have a picture here and I love it. This is from the Spring 3100 edition covering.
Oh yeah,
at summer 2003. Yep, range day with the old timers.
Okay. Yeah. There's Ronnie, there's Ray, there's Sergeant DiMaffio, there's Bobby Duke, Paulie standing right in front of him. A lot of old timers, Pete Majors, God rest his soul. A lot of these guys aren't gone. Brian's next to me, Hearn, Ray Clare, Bill. I've lost his name. I mean, see the guy in the white shirt and the white hat?
Yep.
Bill, I just can't think of his name. Maybe Paulie will remember somebody.
There's Steve Lanos. I see Lanos in there.
Yeah, I think he was.
That's the red shirt.
Which one?
The one in the red shirt right next to Ronnie. I think that's Lenoche.
Yes, that's Lenoche.
Yeah.
I teased Lenoche like crazy, and he would still today. If he sees me, he breaks my chops. I break his chops. He sees my son, same thing.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of there's so much experience. What you're seeing there beyond us. I mean, beyond us. I mean, Jeff Obadiah's in the right corner there. Now, Jeff was in the Air Force for 10 years doing EOD work. I traveled with him quite a bit. We even worked at LSU together for a while. And another very knowledgeable guy. You know, a lot of fun. That day was when we took that picture. Let's just say that an hour before, there was a little bit of chaos.
Jeff told me.
A little bit. Just a little bit.
Jeff gave me a glimpse of when he was on the show last year, about what happened there. He's like, oh, my God, I thought they were going to throw me out of the squad.
I got a phone call. We used to have Nextels. I got a phone call and yelling and screaming. And all I said is, everybody's okay. Click. And that was it. And then we did what we had to do. Paulie, me, whatever. We did what? Ronnie built that bunker. Yeah. Basically, he rebuilt it. Yeah. You know, wow. I mean, listen, not one person got hurt. The design of the bunker and the design of the berm protected everyone. But it's a testament to what fireworks can do, what a sympathetic explosion can do. Okay, you know what I mean? These fireworks sometimes when they go off sympathetically, they're very powerful.
Oh yeah, for sure. And thankfully, like I said, Jeff, nobody got hurt. Jeff was fine.
The old timers were cheering.
He told me.
They gave me a picture of when they blew up the range in the '60s. They said, "You're not the first."
No,
but it was a great day.
Yeah, that sounds like it. A great summer day in the Bronx, 2003. They'll remember it for years to come. And I'm pretty sure whenever you guys see each other in person, that story always comes up one way or another. The laughter still is strong.
Yeah.
Yeah. One job I wanted to ask you about. I don't know if you were retired by this point because it happened in 2005. When there was that explosion outside the British consulate, were you still on the job for that one, or had you retired by that point?
Outside, no, I think I was gone already.
Okay.
Because I was gone already. Because that happened when in like
2005.
September. Yeah.
Let me see. Let me type it in right here on the old interwebs.
I forgot when that happened.
British consulate explosion. Let's see. I'm just going to type it in momentarily and find the answers. Live podcasting, as I always say, at its finest, folks. Bear with me. And this was May 5th, 2005. 2 small explosions went off in a large cement planter outside a building in the British consulate on 3rd Avenue.
Yeah, no, I wasn't there for that. Or I wasn't working that day. Just, if I was.
So, go ahead. No, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I had a job that I remember, being you got Paulie here. Me, Paulie, Ray, Kenny Dean, and Andy Ray. We had a job at the subway station in Times Square of an explosion. A pipe bomb went off. And they figured it out in no time. It was a transit car.
I was going to say, yeah.
The next day.
Yeah.
But Paulie and Ray and the boys, they figured it out. They figured it out in no time.
Yeah.
I mean, they were good guys. They were not only good bomb technicians, they were good street cops, good detectives. Just because you worked in emergency service doesn't mean you couldn't be a good detective.
Right.
You were probably a handier detective than most detectives are. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
In a lot of ways. So, but we had a good mix, and you have to have a good mix. You need the Pericones, you need the Kenny Deans, you need the Ray Clares, the Joe Patowskis,
the Jimmy Caranos.
Yeah, it's makes a good salad. You know what I mean?
No, of course. And let me say, Kevin Perrette on that case from Arson and Explosion did a heck of a job. Did a heck of a job on that case. He figured it out quickly.
We worked very closely with them. Very good. I'm trying to think of their boss Mark Torrey was it before?
Yeah, he was the boss for a while. I forget who came after him.
Yeah, I forget the CEO's name. Night young guy.
Yeah.
I met him at the FBI Academy. Nice guy. He almost got kicked out, but he was. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of good guys. I mean, I think one of them, John Santos, was in A&E. He was in the bomb squad before
he was in bomb squad in the A&E. Yep.
Yep.
John Santos. You had a lot of great guys. I mean, Pete Majors, who passed away.
Recently.
Another guy. Him and I'm trying to think of his name. They really put that dog program together back then. Pete and Neil Monaco. Now it came to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little shocked because, like I say, I had surgery not long ago, and I think I'm still a little wacky.
You would never know that though, because you're firing all cylinders tonight, my friend. You're carrying this show.
Listen, I was at the Elton John concert. I got to see the whole concert. I had a bad heart attack, and 3 days later, they gutted me, and I'm good. I'm good to go. So,
goodness.
Great guys, great guys. They really they could tell you stories about Brandy and Sally, the first two bomb dogs that they had, that they actually found devices on planes.
Yeah,
that were going. You heard that story, right?
Stevie Dodge told it to me off the air.
To Vegas.
Yep.
Then I think it was Sally that hit on the briefcase, the pilot's briefcase with the dynamite. Yeah.
Yeah. Steve Dodge told me about that story one time off the air.
You know where they got those dogs?
Where?
Auburn University.
Really?
Auburn was doing an experiment. The only reason I know is I had contacted them because I also had I became like the canine sergeant with training, sort of. And so I got interested in it. I started doing more and more research, and I wanted to know about them. And they basically said they did it research on the olfactory sense, and they were able to get them on powder, I think, and dynamite. And then when they were done, what are we going to do with it? What are we going to do with these dogs? Well, they called the largest bomb squad in the world, right? Everybody knows the NYPD. Mm-hmm. And I think from there, it really took off. I mean, it really took off.
There's a few guys I want to ask you about before I do. For context, one of the frequent listeners of the show and viewers of the show, Joe Maliga, retired upstate New York correctional officer, and I have a running joke. And this is a question he always submits in the chat. And what he's getting at, basically. So speaking of jobs, Mr. Tony B has dealt with packages with wires and fuse. Did he ever deal with a little package that had an umbilical cord? He wants to know if you ever, before the bomb squad, of course, delivered a baby.
Oh, a baby?
Yeah.
I didn't actually deliver the baby. I was there, sort of giving directions. And it happened so fast. I'm not, my hands stayed clean. I'll tell you that much. Yeah, so I mean, I've been there when babies were born, and unfortunately, I've been there when other things, the other way too.
Yeah.
Yes, no, I know. Little packages, little bundles of joy.
Not for the mom. They're bundles of joy after they come out. But and imagine me, my poor mother in 2000. I was 10 pounds at birth.
So was I.
Oh, really? I'm not the only one.
No,
not the only one.
They used to call me Buster in the hospital, and my mother was tiny Sicilian woman. I mean, tiny.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, God. The guys I wanted to ask you about, and they're not around anymore either. Again, very talented guys that left us way too soon. You work with Kenny Silva. You work with Lou Alvarez, and I think you work with Jerry Brennan too. So we'll start with Kenny.
Another great guy.
Tell me about Kenny first.
I learned a lot from Jerry. Guy was, he was good. Jerry was good. Kenny too. Kenny loved those dogs, and he would go up even against all the bosses if he thought the dogs were mistreated in any way. He loved the dogs. He was good at training the dogs. The guys liked him. And what I like, me and Kenny went to the academy together, actually. So he mentioned it to me, and then we looked at a picture that used to be in the old police academy, and we're in the gym running or something together. But I always liked Kenny, okay? But Kenny had no problem with telling any detective, even the sergeants, if he thought they were doing something that could hurt the dogs or wasn't right with the dogs. He had no problem telling you that, and most of especially most of the supervisors, you got to go with what he's saying because,
yeah,
he's the guy, right. He's the dog guy,
right. No, of course. And he's somebody,
another gentleman gone too soon, unfortunately.
Horrible. Yeah, heart attack.
Yeah.
Heart attack. And with Louis, we'll get to Jerry in a second. With Louis, here's somebody that I remember Jeff, to go back to Jeff, he told me one time, he was joking with me. Louis wanted something quieter after all his years in narcotics, so he came to the bomb squad. And this is, on this show, when we do Tales from the Boom Room, I pay a lot of tribute to Danny Richards, and I'll continue to, because I don't want people to forget about him. But these guys, like you said, they're just as missed. They were just as important to the squad, and it's important we don't forget about them either.
No,
so just with Louis, tell me about him. And why did he come to the squad? What was his background in explosives?
You're talking about, say again?
Louis Alvarez. What was his background with explosives?
Another great guy. Louis came in. I was on his interview. Comes in, he's got all these tattoos, right, and everything. The first thing I started teasing him, he teased me back. I mean, he was just another comfortable guy that you knew would fit. See, one thing about being a bomb squad, you don't have to be in the military doing EOD work. I mean, could it be helpful? Like in Jeff's case, it was. Jeff over there. He brought a lot of knowledge to the squad in a lot of other ways. But sometimes bringing a new set of eyes in that's willing to learn, to open up and say, I really don't know nothing. I'm going to sit back and listen. Good work ethic, great guy. I think he came in because if you think about it, he had a pretty steady career in narcotics. He was a pretty sharp guy. Did a lot of things in narcotics. I mean, you can only go so far. I was in the narcotics division. After a while, you want to get out of the narcotics division. And I think it was fitting for him to come to the bomb squad because I think he probably liked the element of excitement that narcotics gave us. And I think he got the element of excitement in the bomb squad. Listen, there's not a lot of bombs going off, but that doesn't mean that when it's game day or you're out there in a suit and you really don't know what you have, you get that adrenaline rush, okay? Being in the bomb squad, I used to tell people, they say, oh, you're in the bomb squad. Oh, how it's dangerous, right? I said, it's probably the safest place to be in the police department. And they say, what do you mean? I said, because a lot of the people in the bomb squad are very talented. They are analyzing things, doing things, and they have the ability to really sort of dissect something and say, this is how I got to attack this. This is something. This is nothing. I mean, it's and Louis. I think he wanted more, and I think he got more. And I think he got camaraderie because narcotics, especially when you're an undercover, they're close. I worked with a lot of undercovers, and they're close. I think he came for a little more excitement. I know it was a comfortable place to work, and now it was a younger unit. I think a lot of guys got thrown off in the early days because there was a lot of old timers there, and they might have been a little intimidated,
Oh, and then, of course, with Jerry Brennan, he was a guy that I think Brian Hearn told me on 9/11 was one of the guys that drove him back from the Trade Center site to the 6th Precinct. Here's a guy that not a lot of people, at least for the Tales from the Boom Room audience, I know you guys didn't know about, but just for those that don't know who he was, give me the background on Jerry Brennan, too.
Jerry Brennan was a former emergency guy, but he was in a bomb squad a long time. When I got there, he basically also, like Dennis Mulcahy, basically I'd go out to the range and Jerry would teach me everything, whatever it could, whether it was a pan disruptor, whether it was capping up into explosives and things like that. He was a very knowledgeable guy, and he was an old school guy. I remember going to a job with Jerry, and it was in a police precinct, and there was a cocky sergeant behind the desk, and there was a device that was brought into the precinct, put on the floor in front of what they call the 124 room, right by the desk, right? So he basically looks at it, the sergeant, deems it to be nothing, right? Nothing. Now there's a threat within the whole thing, whatever. He doesn't really know. So when we get there, Jerry looks at me, he goes, we got to teach this guy a lesson. Let's evacuate this precinct. So we evacuate the precinct, right? And we did a little practice in the precinct. We shot a pan round, we blew it up, it was nothing. Moral of the story was, the example that sergeant set to everybody in the precinct, he could have endangered everybody. I mean, realistically, we did the job the way we could have did it. Okay, did we have to do it that way? We might have been able to take it out with the robot. But we did, when they heard that pop go off, and the mess it made in the precinct. The sergeant, I told the sergeant, and that happens a lot, unfortunately. Everybody wants to be the bomb technician. A lot of guys, I was in the military. I'm a veteran. I worked with EOD guys, but I was a military police investigator, but I didn't know nothing about it. I mean, we've had guys that handled thermite. Me and Joe Patowski walked into a precinct. The guys get stats, a smoke grenade. It was a thermite grenade. He's playing with it in the precinct. Thermite, when it burns, it would have burned through there, through the desk, through the floor. It is. But Jerry was like, he was a fun guy. He didn't take himself that seriously. He worked with Brian Hearn, and to work with Brian, I love Brian. We worked in Staten Island together. We had a big pig job in Staten Island, a hog, a 300-pound hog. I lassoed it, and Brian tried to get it. He was in emergency at the time.
He was in Vibe Truck, yep.
Broke the pig's neck. Forget, it was a bad day. But to work with Brian, because he was a funny guy, another 1,000-mile-an-hour guy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And Jerry was sort of the buffer. Two good guys. Jerry was a great guy. Yeah, he doesn't get enough credit because he was always willing to help you. Always.
Right.
Richie Kiesma, the same way.
Yeah.
You ever talk to Richie?
I've had Richie on the show multiple times. He's great.
Yeah, Richie, one of my best friends. I love him. I love Richie. I don't think he even knows I had a heart attack. I didn't call him. I mean, it just. Will he probably know? By now, he'll probably know. But
he'll probably. And you know what?
What it is.
You and I have beef because I'm over here following up with you, seeing how you're doing. Paul Yurku told me that you had a heart attack. I didn't even freaking know.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you know what, Tony? I'll forgive you. I'll let it slide. But come on now.
Yeah. No. Listen. I'm good. They crack you open. They. Well,
thankfully.
I'm good to go.
But it's funny because I'm like, you're over here, like I said earlier, you're firing all cylinders. Look at this guy, folks. He had a heart attack and you never know it because Paul Yurku.
That's probably why I had the heart attack because in anti-crime, I was known as the sergeant that was the Energizer bunny on crack. That was constant.
That
Paul will tell you. I wasn't always that constructive, but
it fits you well.
I like to move.
It fits you well because Paulie had texted me and I was out and about with my family. He's like, are you out right now? I'm like, yeah. He's like, call me as soon as you get home. And all of a sudden, my heart starts racing. I'm like, oh no, what's this mean? It's probably bad news about one of the guys. He's like, yeah, checking on Tony, had a heart attack. I'm thinking this guy's over here laid up and things aren't going well. Look at him tonight, folks.
I'll be honest with you. Within 2 days, I had a triple bypass, and then that was it. I'm good. I'm 3 months here, and I'm still here.
Well, very good.
Yeah,
very good.
I'm good. It is what it is, right?
Yeah, he's still alive and kicking.
That's right. I'm still above ground.
Yeah, as the old Simple Minds song says. Real quick, go ahead.
No. I was gonna say that it's funny how a lot of the old timers, like you mentioned, Jerry Brennan, Kevin Barry, they had a lot of knowledge because remember they inherited that knowledge from the old timers like I'm trying to think of Bill's last name. I can't think of it. And Artie Hornich. Artie Hornich was a legend.
Mm-hmm.
His son was in emergency too. And he used to live in Staten Island. I used to run into him. And he was well into his 80s. And in old timers day, he came up to the range. We had him up there, right? With everybody else. He's got his little off duty, brand new, like it's brand new. Like he's probably had it for 40 years, but it's brand new. And he's telling stories about about the pipe and the human excrement in the pipe. And when they used to open it, they used to get splattered with crap and all that stuff. And it's funny how the old timers reminded me of the new breed because when they were together up at the range, Paulie will tell you, they were teasing each other. Like Artie Hornich was saying, you see that guy over there? He was a skirt. You know what a skirt is in the police department?
Tell me.
An inside guy. Does like a secretary.
House mouse.
They would break each other's chops and stuff. I mean, I think the type of person that eventually goes into the bomb squad sort of becomes that type of person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And unless you're an oddball, you sort of go with it. I was so glad that Paul convinced my son not to go to homicide and to go into the bomb squad, and he loves it. My son now.
Well, good. Quick funny story before I ask you one of the questions, and we'll get to the rapid fire. Is that when I was looking for you originally, I think at the end of last year, because you guys, I mean, of course, there's you, Tony Sr., and then him, Jr. I called him by accident.
Right.
You know, and I felt bad because Tony Jr.'s wife got nervous. He's like, who is this guy? And Tony Jr., actually, to his credit, he defended me. He's like, no, he's okay. He did a podcast with Paulie. You know, he's good. He's good people. And he got in touch with you. And I'd like to, if he watches this, thank you. First of all, thank you for what you do every day in the Bomb Squad.
I don't do anything. I'm retired.
Well, no, of course. Well, to Tony Jr., I'm saying, thank you for what you're doing right now. And to you, too. Thank you for what you're doing right now in the Bomb Squad, Tony Jr. And thank you for helping set this up by talking to your father and putting in a good word for me. I appreciate it, and stay safe with you, and not only with you, I should say, but all the guys that are currently doing great work in the Bomb Squad. So I'll ask you real quick, as the cover for my microphone drops off there. Sorry about that, folks. 2005, when you called it a day after 22 years, what was the moment you knew, you know what? Yeah, I love this job. It's been fun, but it's time to go.
I didn't call it a day. My heart called it a day.
Oh.
I'll tell you the quick story.
Okay.
Paulie was with me that day. We were coming up. I think Paulie had suited up. It was in a subway station. I'm trying to think what station it was. It was in Midtown. And, I was carrying up the bomb bag, the helmet, nothing, 25 pounds. I was doing the gym every day. 25 pounds. All of a sudden, I didn't feel so good, and pain in my jaw and whatever. So I kept denying it. But then I noticed my attitude was changing. And Paul, if Paulie's listening, he's heard me tell him this 1,000 times. One time I yelled at Paulie for nothing, and I knew there was something wrong with me, because that wasn't me. That wasn't me. It was like a different, like I knew I was getting sick, So I put it off, and then finally I started getting these pains. They put me in, stented me up. They said, "You're out of here." So I would have been there till 63. I would have never left.
You would have worked with your son?
Almost, yeah. Almost. But I would have never left. But it was one of those places that when you get there, and especially the guys that were there, the B team was, I had Paulie, I had Kenny Dean, I had Andy Ray, Ray Clare, another character, funny. We had laughs, we had fun. I mean, Paulie would set up things for Fleet Week. Nobody ever did that before. He'd take an old truck and he'd put a microwave in it, TVs in it. Everybody loved us when we go to details. It was
great times, man.
These Intel guys would come, and the people that did the detail, they would come and hang out with the Bomb Squad. Because Paulie made it comfortable.
Oh, of course, and I'm glad that they detected that at least. But it's funny because I say this with love for Mark Torrey, another great guy who, when he retires, I need to get him on this show. But I know he has to look around and feel super duper old because he worked with you. Now he's working with your son. He worked with Dennis Mulcahy. Now he's working with Dennis's son. So he's like, Jesus Christ. But that's another guy that honestly, unless he has a health issue, and hopefully he doesn't, obviously, he's going to 63. He ain't. I'd be shocked if he quits before he ages out. He's aging out, Mark Torrey.
Oh, without a doubt. Mark can't leave. Mark is Mark. I know Mark. Let's see. Almost, I bet you 35 years or so, basically. I knew him when he was a cop in the Bomb Squad as a sergeant,
Yep.
And a very sharp guy, a brilliant guy. Funny. Like, he would come up one time, he said to me, "Hey, Tony, I need you to quantify this." I said, "Quantify?" I said, "What does that mean?" And he started laughing. He was that way. Could be very serious and then be very funny.
Right. No, he's great.
Paulie cooked a meal one time, and one of the guys put out the silverware. So Mark sits down and he sees one of the forks is a cake fork. He says, "I can't eat with that." So we're all looking at it. Well, it's a fork. What do you mean? It's a cake fork. That's the way he is. That's the way he is. But the guy knows. Let me tell you something. He knows his stuff.
No, he does. And it's funny because,
I mean, listen, you get into a place and you're there a long time. I know there's a lot of politics involved, and sometimes it could be very frustrating and whatever. But, he didn't get there. He didn't get there on his good looks. That's for sure.
No, you know what? He earned it, and it's funny because a very modest guy. Because Kevin Barry had given him my number, and I had done my 2-part episode with Kevin last year, And he calls me. It's a 347 number, and I pick it up, and it's him. He's talking to me, and granted, I'm a nobody, and he's the commander of the largest bomb squad in the world. He doesn't have to give me the time of day. He doesn't have to give me a nanosecond. And he talks to me for a half hour, like we've known each other 30 years. He's puffing on a cigar because I could hear him smoking on the other end on his way home. And he's like, all right, big guy, one day I'll bring you down here. We'll have a beer and we'll talk about it. And like I said, I'm an absolute nobody. And he's talking
You're
to me
not
like
a nobody.
I'm,
You're providing not only a good service. I mean, think about the people that are watching your podcast, right? I mean,
that's true.
They learn not only about the bomb squad or whatever, policing in general. Some are cops from other places, some are civilians, some just think about going on to the police department. You're providing something that, is original and it's real. It's real. It's not staged or it's not scripted.
No. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And thank you to everybody. I say this, this started on a whim because Billy Ryan, I told the story before. Billy Ryan and I'd had him on the show. I'd seen him on another podcast that he did with a mutual friend of ours who's also retired from the job. And sure enough, Billy comes on and I said, how about I start a mini series on all the A&E and the Bomb Squad guys? And I said, I need a name for it. Billy always said, if I write a book, he's going to call it Tales from the Boom Boom Room. So I said, let me shorten that. Tales from the Boom Room was born. And here we are all these volumes later. And here you are tonight on the show for the volume 33. Now we'll end as we always end on the show with the rapid fire. And it's 5 hit run questions from me, 5 hit run answers from you. You can say pass if you want. Are you ready?
Hey, guys, I don't hear well, so speak up.
No problem. Okay, so it's the rapid fire. 5 hit and run questions from me, 5 hit and run answers from you. You can say pass if you want to. Okay. And the first question that we'll begin with, you mentioned some of them, but you can mention some more. Funniest colleagues you ever worked with?
Funniest colleague I ever worked with. Okay, give me a second.
Colleagues. Yeah.
What?
Colleagues.
What'd you say that again?
Colleagues you ever worked with.
Oh, colleague. The funniest colleague I ever worked with was probably Jeff over there. Could be funny.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me. Sounds like him. A lot of
he could be funny. If he was comfortable with you, he was funny. If not, he was a stick.
Because he can catch you off guard. Because I remember when I was first speaking with him, and I left him a message, and I let him know all the guys I knew, which make me seem less random to him. He calls me up, very nice guy, and he ended up being a great interview. I said, let me get your email, kind of like I said to you, so I could make an outline and I could send it to you. And he says, it's President Biden at whitehouse.com. And I'm like, wait a minute. And he's like, gotcha. So as he said, funny guy. And second question, the rapid fire. And this could include the bomb squad too. Most uplifting call that you ever responded to.
In the bomb squad or in my job?
In your job, in your whole career.
Uplifting for me personally?
Yes.
Where I felt it was something that's satisfying?
Yep.
When I was in the narcotics division, we were doing a raid. And there was probably 80 of us running through a housing project. And we're running after all these perps and all kinds of stuff going off. And a school bus is there. And a little girl gets off and she's right in the middle. And she grabs me. She says, I'm afraid. Obviously, where do you live? I take her through these urine-filled hallways, filled with crack vials, needles, everything. 4 flights up, this little girl has to walk by herself with all this going on. So I take her up. I open the door. I knock on the door. Her mother opens the door. It was like paradise. You went from hell to paradise. Beautiful. The mother kept the apartment great. She was in tears. She cried, said, thank you for bringing my daughter up. I worry every day. To me, that was very, I said, that was more for me than her.
That's nice.
Yeah,
that's very nice.
So I've done other things. I've had rescues and stuff like that. I had a few. But that, to me, that little girl and getting her home so she wasn't frightened. But unfortunately, I'm not there every day. There's not cops there every day. That was her way of life. And it's sad. But
yeah. Wherever she is, I hope she's doing okay, though. Maybe she came on the job. Who knows?
I hope so.
Yeah, well, I hope so, too. Third, because there's a lot of great cooks in the bomb squad, and Stevie Burbridge was one of them. Favorite squad room snack or meal?
Paulie's meals. I think Paulie's pork chops were good. Yeah, Paulie learned to cook from a guy I went to high school with, another emergency service guy, and he'll tell you his name. Paulie was a good cook.
Text it to me, Paulie.
Yeah, I liked everything, Paulie, man. Paulie couldn't make a bad meal.
He's getting a lot of love tonight, you know. But he deserves it. He deserves it. I kid. I love Paul.
Like I said.
I love
They were all good. They were all, every one of them. Everyone. Andy Ray, quietest guy, great. We loved hunting. He was a hunter, funny guy. That's another guy that could actually be funny, a very funny guy.
You see, Paulie, what other podcast gives you this much love? And for free. And for free.
Nothing.
He did not pay us. We do it because we want to. Who better than you, Paulie? Who better? You're living the life, my friend. So, fourth, favorite cop show or cop movie?
The only cop show that best movie I ever liked, cops. I know everybody likes the 7 Ops car chase. Was a movie called The New Centurions. Okay,
I've heard of it.
Seen it?
I've heard of it. I've never seen it. I need to see it.
Well, watch it with George C. Scott. It's especially for a guy on patrol that spent his whole life on patrol and then it's over, you know, and his life is over. And it's just a good movie. TV show. I like the Law and Orders because they were a little more realistic. I love Chicago PD, and I would love to be that sergeant who keeps a stash of $300,000 in his vault, you know, and basically, you know, tortures people. I would love to do that, but that ain't happening.
Yeah.
You know, so to me, I like all the Law and Orders.
I love Law and Order. Look what he says. I'll name the cookbook after you guys. This guy, you see him? You see what he said?
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
He's got his Paulie Perico LLC. I love him.
Yeah, he's in business.
LLC.
He's in business now with the new job, especially.
Well,
but
he has a lot to offer.
Yeah, of course.
He'd be wasting talent if he just didn't share it.
No, and that's the case with a lot of you guys. Retired from ESU, retired from obviously the bomb squad. A lot of knowledge. Same thing with the fire service guys. I've said this before. Law and Order. I love them all. I love the original version more because Jerry Orbach was just amazing. Yeah. Love Jerry Orbach. He was my favorite. He was the best. And I love his one-liners. You know, I always at the scene of the homicide. He always came up with something so clever to say. And when the body's right there, it's not even cold yet. You know.
I'll give you a quick Jerry Orbach story.
Please, I love him. He's my favorite actor.
We're going to a gun run, right? I'm in an unmarked car. There's another unmarked car going the wrong way. I said, stop, tell them they're going the wrong way. They were doing what they call a long shot in the village because they did a lot in the village. It was him and his partner there, right? As I always see him, I go, you going the right? He goes, no, we're going the right way. And then we took off. And he laughed. And then we saw him later on. He was a nice guy. Very nice.
True New Yorker. And I'll end with the fifth and final question, the rapid fire. You got a son in the bomb squad now. Obviously, he got on the job, and the job has changed a lot. But just focusing specifically on bomb technicians. Let's say you grab a guy or a gal that just graduated from Huntsville. What advice would you give him as a bomb tech?
Keep your eyes open. Listen. Okay. Don't see ghosts. They're teaching you real well. Not everything is a bomb, but also find somebody that you feel comfortable with, and just like being a cop, take a little from this guy, a little from that guy, but keep your mouth shut. They have more experience than you. If they give you some advice, you might want to take it.
Oh, of course. And I love it. Great. This has been fantastic. Don't say goodbye. We'll say goodbye off the air. Before we go, is there any shout outs to anyone or anything that you want to give?
Anyone?
Shout outs to anyone or anything that you want to give?
Yeah, I do. I'd like to give a shout out to the new bomb squad. A lot of the guys I don't know, other than my son and the young Mulcahy. Remember, you have to keep the tradition going. So, do your best, be safe, God bless you, and just carry on that tradition, and maybe we'll see you at the 200th anniversary.
Hopefully I can get down to the bomb squad soon. I'm going to try to work it out with some friends of mine and pay a visit to the guys and the gals and take those gals for a tour. Like I said, stick around. We'll say goodbye off the air. Coming up next. on the Mike the New Haven podcast, emergency service cop. And Paul, speaking of, you work with him. He was originally a transit rescue cop, and with the merge came over to ESU. Of course, Joe Acasio will be here for volume 27 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's emergency service unit. That should be fun. And then Tuesday, we're going to get back to the best of the bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite. I had to postpone the interview originally, but now it's back on volume 33. Retired FDNY chief John Sulka. So a couple of good shows on tap for both the best of the bravest and the E-Men inside the NYPD's emergency service unit. In the meantime, this has been volume 33 of Tales from the Boom Room, Profiles of the NYPD's Arson, Explosion, and Bomb Squad. I am Mike Colón, and we will see you next time. Have a great weekend, everybody, and stay safe.